Good morning. We are so glad to see each and every one of you with us this morning. Today is our graduate recognition service, and I certainly don't want to take anything away from that. We congratulate and honor those that are our graduates today. You know, we live in a very troubled world, but when you think about those that are graduating from high school and colleges, and all the various places they are graduating from, it gives me a little more confidence about their impact that they'll have on the world and the contribution they'll make to make our world a much better place. Now, another thing I want to mention this morning, this afternoon, as a general rule, on the evening of our graduate recognition service, we don't have an evening service. But we are going to have an evening service this afternoon at 6 o'clock. Everybody say 6 o'clock. 6 o'clock, we're going to have a baptism service, and would invite all of you to come and be a part of that. And also, a part of our baptism activity is at 5 o'clock, I'll be teaching a baptism class. And you may wonder what in the world is taught in a baptism class. Well, there are 5 things that I go over when we have a baptism class, and the first of which is the phrase, believer's baptism. Everybody say that. We want to stress that we baptize believers. Now, if you're here this morning and you are a believer, but you've never been baptized, we would love for you to come and be a part of our baptism service this afternoon. Now, if you're going to participate in our baptism service, we do need you to come at 5 o'clock and be a part of that baptism class, because we really do emphasize the idea of believers' baptism. And so we'll talk to you about that aspect of baptism, but there are 5 things that we talk about there, and that's at 5 o'clock. But the service is at 6 o'clock. Now, if you're going to be here and be baptized, and you have people who want to come and witness the baptism, family, friends, whatever, they really do need to be here at 5 o'clock, because just a few minutes after 5 is when we actually do the baptism. And if they get here, yes, 6 o'clock, 6 o'clock. Y'all knew what I was saying right. Regardless of what I was saying, you knew what I was thinking. Yes, no, yes. 6 o'clock, baptism service. You need to be here right at 6 o'clock. And the class starts at 5, but the service starts at 6. So if you have some people coming to join you, they will need to be here by 6, or they might miss it. But anyway, once again, we are so proud of all of our graduates. Thank you for all that you have done and all that you are going to contribute to our world, and we are so proud of each and every one of you. John has a wonderful message to share with you this morning, and thank you so much for being with us in our worship.
Thank you, Pastor, and thank all of you for being here. Thank you for choosing to be at Broadway, and if you are joining us online, we thank you for being with us as well. Like I always say, but I do mean it, I hope that you have come ready to sing praises to God. Will you please stand and sing with us?
Will bow down. history. Your faithfulness has walked beside me. The winter storms made way for spring. In every season, from where I'm standing, I see the evidence of your goodness all over my life, all over my life. I see your promises in fulfillment all over my life, all over my life. Help me remember when I'm weak. Fear may come, but fear will leave. You lead my heart to victory. You are my strength, and you always will be. I see the evidence of your goodness all over my life, all over my life. I see your promises in fulfillment all over my life, all over my life. See the cross, the empty grave, the evidence is endless. All my sin rolled away because of you, oh Jesus. See the cross, the empty grave, the evidence is endless. All my sin rolled away because of you, oh Jesus. Oh, I see the evidence of your goodness all over my life, all over my life. I see your promises in fulfillment all over my life, all over my life. I see the evidence of your goodness all over my life, all over my life. I see your promises in fulfillment all over my life, all over my life. Why should I fear? The evidence is here. Why should I fear? The evidence is here.
I love you, Lord, for your mercy never fails me. And all my days I've been held in your hands. From the moment that I wake up until I lay my head, oh, I will sing of the goodness of God. And all my life you have been faithful. And all my life you have been so, so good. With every breath that I is running after, it's running after me. Your goodness is running after, it's running after me. With my life laid down, I'm surrendered now. I give you everything. 'Cause your goodness is running after, it's running after me.
Sing that again.
Your goodness is running after, it's running after me. Your goodness is running after, it's running after me. With my life laid down and surrendered now, I give you everything. 'Cause your goodness is running after, it's running after me. And all my life you have been faithful. And all my life you have been so, so good. With every breath that I am able, oh, I will sing of the goodness of God.
God, thank you for today. Father, thank you for your goodness. Thank you for the fact that your goodness continues to pursue us. God, but not just that you've been good. You have been faithful. Father, even when we've failed you, when we've let you down, God, it doesn't matter what we've done, you have continued to remain faithful. So, Lord, this morning as we come and we celebrate the faithfulness of those who've accomplished a milestone in their life, God, we just celebrate that. And Father, we're reminded of just how faithful you've been. Lord, we ask that you be with the rest of this service today as we continue to worship you. God, make us mindful of your faithfulness. Move us. To a place where we are more faithful because of your faithfulness. God, we love you. We thank you for today. We ask that you just continue to be with us as we worship you now. In your name we pray. Amen.
Before we dismiss for Children's Church, I have promised Miss Sarah that I would bring this trophy and show you what our boys on Wednesday night won. Now, we had a competition about 2 weeks ago where they had to escape from a room, and they versed the girls, and the boys came up with the most answers that allowed them to escape, and they were all Bible related. And I would also like to invite you, if you have a child between 4 and 6th grade and would like for them to attend, we meet on Wednesday nights at right now between 6 and 7 until Bible school starts. It is now time for Children's Church. If you have a child between the ages of 4 and 2nd grade and would like for them to attend, just have them meet at the middle back door, and remember at the end of the service to come downstairs to sign them out.
Too many buttons. Good morning. Thank you guys so much for being a part of our graduation recognition service. It's something that I look forward to every year, and so I'm grateful that you guys were all here to be a part of it with us today. We have a lot of graduates we're going to recognize, and so we're going to try and go through this as fast as we possibly can. That's not to diminish them. That's just to celebrate together. I think there's 14 that we get to recognize today, and that's awesome. That there have been some big accomplishments made in our church. And so I'm going to ask if they're here in service, if they will come down. Kelsey has a gift for them. She's going to meet them down here. And then if you guys want, just kind of line up across here. We're going to let families come and stand around them as Riley gives them just a prayer at the end of this. And so graduates, or if you're being recognized, if you'll come up here, see Kelsey, and then just kind of make a line across here, that'd be awesome. That'd be great. So the first one we're going to recognize is Haven Brown. Yeah. You guys can start moving this way. That's awesome. Haven is graduating from Plainview High School. She plans to attend Northeast Community College for 2 years, and Haven said she's like, when she turned in her form, she's like, I kind of feel incomplete because I don't know what's after that, but whatever God wants me to do, I'm all right with. That is a awesome testimony. Josie Brown is the next one we're going to recognize. She's also graduating from Plainview High School. And she plans to attend Northeast Community College as well in the fall, and then go and see what goes from there. We got to recognize Lane Fortner in the first service. I don't know, he might have already gone home. I don't know where Lane went, but we got to recognize him in the first service. He graduated from Cornerstone Christian Academy and plans to attend Northeast Community College on a music scholarship in the fall. McKenna Moore graduated from Plainview High School, or is going to graduate from Plainview High School. She has been coming on Wednesday nights for a long time. She texted me and she's like, I'm so sorry. This is the first Sunday I've had to work in forever and I can't be there. But we wanted to recognize her. Lacey Oliver is graduating from Plainview High School. And Lacey, correct me, now, are you and McKenna still thinking you guys are going to live together at JSU? She's not going, okay, good. Sorry, no, not good. But Lacey is planning to attend JSU in the fall, and we're excited about that. I know they were excited to live together, but they also had some concerns about it, so I think that probably worked its way out. Micah Robertson is our next one we get to recognize. Micah is graduating from Homeschool Group, and he is excited to start UPS in August. Is that right, Micah? In August, he's going to be delivering all your packages to you. So be nice to Micah and get to know Micah very well. Next, we get to recognize Emma Smith and her brother Ethan Smith. Yeah, they are twins too, so that's neat. And this is going to be incredible. All right, so you guys are going to Northeast Community College in the fall, and then you're going to transfer to Alabama, where you're going to major in engineering, and then they're going to go into the Air Force, right? Together too. That's awesome. So we're excited for them and everything that God has for them in the future. That's some good stuff. These are all graduating from high school. Emma and Ethan both are graduating from Plainview High School. So these are all graduating high school. We do have a lot of college graduates that we're going to recognize now. Dr. Cliff Dearman. Cliff, those of you guys who know Cliff, he graduated with his residency from Pennsylvania State University with the residency in anesthesiology. He will begin his fellowship in cardiothoracic anesthesiology at the University of Florida. Also, we have Avery Holt. Avery is graduating. Avery's graduating from University of South Alabama with a bachelor's degree in radiology science. And she is currently working at University of Alabama, Birmingham, as a radiation therapist. There it is. Thank you. They're really smart. Next, we have Colby Kirk. Colby is graduating from Northeast Community College with an associate's in applied science and nursing. This summer, Colby's doing the internship with the DeKalb Baptist Association, where she's going to travel and help with VBS through our association. And then she plans to start a nursing job in the fall. Next, we have Jayla Martin. Jayla graduated from Jacksonville State University with a Bachelor's of Science in Exercise and Wellness, and she is going to attend University of South Alabama in Mobile and attending OT school in the fall. What is OT? That's what I thought, but I didn't want to guess and be wrong. Occupational therapist school in the fall down at University of Mobile. Next, we have Addison Rains. Addison graduated from Auburn University with a Bachelor in Science of Nutrition Dietetics. She begins her internship in graduate school at Auburn in the fall. And then we have Maddie Shankles. Maddie is graduating from... Maddie's graduating from Northeast Alabama Community College with an Associates of Science, and she is currently attending Athens State, where she is pursuing an elementary education degree. And so we are proud of all of them, all that they've accomplished. Listen, there's some milestones that have been reached right here, standing before you. And so make sure you celebrate with them. If you see them today, tell them congratulations, how proud of them, how happy you are of them. We do have two others that I am afraid I might get beat up if I say them, but I'm going to go ahead and say it from here because they have to beat me up here. Josh Clements and Chase Parker both graduated with their master's degree in leadership, something administration. And so he told me the title, but it was really long, and I didn't have a pen to write it down. But they're big guys. I'm not going to call them up here, but I just want you guys to know that they both graduated. And so make sure you recognize them, tell them congratulations as well. And so, guys, if you'll kind of spread out. Family, I'm going to ask if you'd like to come stand and just stand next to your graduate. We're going to have a time of prayer over them. And I'm going to ask Riley Edwards if he'll come and just lead in a time of prayer over them.
Thank you for the opportunity to gather with these graduates today, Lord. Thank you for what they bring to the table, Lord, and the life they have lived to this point, Lord. I pray, Lord, that you be with them and guide them as they turn the page into a new chapter. Pray that the lessons learned in the past can help guide them to future choices and decisions. Pray, God, you be with each of the parents that are with these kids right now, Lord, as they, continue to pray for their children as they move on in the direction they're headed. Thank you, Lord, as, the blessing that they have brought us as we've been able to minister to them in the youth groups on Wednesday nights. And just pray, God, that you guide their steps, guide their thinking. I pray, Lord, that, like you say, that let the words of my mouth, meditation of my heart, Lord, be accepted in your sight as they go through their life, Lord. I just thank you for the awards that they've received and the opportunities they have ahead of them, Lord. In Christ's name, amen.
Y'all recognize them one more time as they head back to their seats and just give them a round of applause. It's interesting that as I looked back of what these students have gone through, college, high school, all of it, it was, to say it was a different year. I mean, it's amazing talking to teachers, talking to students, the differences that they've faced since 2020 and COVID and the pandemic and everything like that, and how everything has become so different and become difficult for them. And so to reach this point is a true milestone. This is a big accomplishment without any doubt at all. And there's a phrase that's been going around, and let me see if you guys have heard it or not. I've become more than familiar with it, but I'm just curious, by show of hand, how many of you have heard the phrase this year, we're settling into a new normal? Anybody hear that? Yeah, I'm sorry, I was watching Patrick Blevins, and he's like, oh yeah, all the time. It's school has become a thing where they've had to settle into a new normal. And really, when you think about that, settling down is something that we kind of all aspire to, don't you? We were joking around with the students on Wednesday night. We did a graduate recognition with them on Wednesday in our service, and I asked them where they wanted to be in 10 years, and every one of them without a doubt said, not living with my parents. Sorry, parents, they're just kind of ready to go on their own. But, we all have those dreams and those plans, right? Nobody wants to be 35 and living in mom and dad's basement and, mooching mac and cheese from them on Friday night. That's not anybody's ambition. Everybody desires to go out and start a family and to start a life and to settle down. And we use that term to mean that, we kind of have established our own way. It's interesting as I started thinking about that idea of settling down, and I caught myself saying to my daughter, y'all got to help me out with my daughter, Nora. The girl's crazy. Like, she is just fearless and nuts. And like, all of a sudden, one day I walk in and she's on the ottoman in our living room, and she's like, Dad, watch this. And she jumps, just like flies through the air onto the couch. And I'm like, Nora, settle down, you're gonna hurt yourself. I mean, I find myself saying this to her all the time, like, Nora, settle down, you're gonna hurt yourself. Hey, that's not a good idea, you're gonna hurt yourself. But what I always end up doing right after that, because I catch myself, is I say, I love that you're adventurous and that you're not scared of anything, but, you need to settle down because you're gonna hurt yourself. And somewhere in the back of my mind, I feel like my care and my concern for my daughter, the reason I'm telling her to settle down, is somehow inhibiting all the good characteristics about her, right? I don't want my kid to be scared of stuff, and so I want her to be adventurous. I also just don't want to deal with the crying fit that comes when she hurts herself. And so many times we tell people to settle down, but I also feel like this check inside me every time I do that, because I'm like, you're diminishing what could happen in her life. I never would have known that Nora could do a flip until one day Nora started dancing, and all of a sudden she put her hands down and threw herself forward and did a flip. My first reaction was, hey, settle down, you're gonna hurt yourself. But then I realized if I would have not let her do that, she never would have known she could do a flip. Now she tells everybody, I can do a flip, and it's really not a flip, it's just kind of a tuck and roll. But she lands on her back sometimes, and everything's okay. And so this morning I wanna look at the idea of settling down. But what I wanna challenge the class of 2021, and what I want to challenge all of us with, is the idea that don't settle down. See, I think a lot of times we settle down, and in the process of settling down, what we end up doing is we never see the true potential that could be out there. 2020 was a change in everything, and everyone became all right to settling into the new normal. But do you realize that if we would have settled for the new normal, we never would have pushed for a vaccine? We never would have pushed things like online church. We never would have pushed things like finding ways to reach out to our community, because we would have settled into the new normal, which was social distancing and mask and everything like that. And we never would have pushed through to see what could happen and how resilient we as a society could be. Seniors, if you would have settled into just being what everyone told you to be, you never will push to see the true potential that's out there. And so my fear for all of us is that if we're willing to settle down, we'll never push to see what God could actually do. There's a story in the Old Testament. It's in Numbers chapter 32, and I'm going to read it. It's a long section. It's in your listening guides, so bear with me. It's going to take a little while to read through it, because I think that it's important that we read through the entire scripture. And so it's in Numbers chapter 32. It's in your listening guides, or if you have your Bibles and you want to flip there. It starts out and it says this: the Reubenites and the Gadites, who had very large herds and flocks, saw that the land of Jeriz and Gilead were suitable for livestock. So they came to Moses and Eleazar the priest and the leaders of the community and said, Adaroth, Didao, Jerez, Nimrah, Heshbon, Eliah, Zebam, Nebo, and Beon, the land the Lord subdued before the people of Israel, are suitable for livestock, and your servants have livestock. If we have found favor in your eyes, they said, then let this land be given to your servants as a possession, and do not make us cross over to the Jordan. Picking up in verse 6, it says this: Moses said to the Gadites and the Reubenites, should your fellow Israelites go to war while you sit here? Why do you discourage the Israelites from crossing over into the land that the Lord has given them? This is what your fathers did when I sent them from Kadesh Barnea to look over the land. After they went up to the valley of Eshcol and viewed the land, they discouraged the Israelites from entering the land the Lord had given to them. The Lord's anger was aroused in that day, and he swore this oath: because they have not followed me wholeheartedly, not one of those who were 20 years old or more when they came out of Egypt will see the land I promised on the oath to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Not one except Caleb the Jephunneh and the Kizanite and Joshua the son of Nun, for they followed the Lord wholeheartedly. The Lord's anger burned against Israel, and he made them wander in the wilderness for 40 years, until the whole generation of those who had done evil in his sight was gone. And here you are, a brood of sinners, standing in the place of your fathers, and making the Lord even more angry with Israel. If you turn away from following him, he will again leave all his people in the wilderness, and you will be the cause of their destruction. Then they came to him and said, We would like to build pens here for our livestock and cities for our women and children. But we will arm ourselves for battle and go ahead of the Israelites until we have brought them into their place. Meanwhile, our women, our children will live in fortified cities for protection from the inhabitants of the land. We will not return to our homes until each of the Israelites has received their inheritance. We will not receive any inheritance with them on the other side of the Jordan, because our inheritance has come to us on this side of the Jordan. I know it's a long passage of scripture, a lot to go over, but what you find here is 2.5 tribes of the 12 tribes of Israel decided that they were done. They were just going to settle right where they were. They didn't want to go over to the other side of the Jordan. They didn't want to go into the promised land. They were happy to stay right where they were. And you find that Moses actually gets pretty upset with them. And in fact, what you find later in Scripture is that this was never what God intended for them. And they pay the price for settling too soon. So in the process of thinking through this, it got me to kind of do some research. And here's how I do research. I go to Google. Anybody else love Google? I love going to Google. I type in, why did this happen? What all happened? And I found out all kinds of stuff about them. But the other question I asked was, why do people settle? We all know those people, right, who have settled for that job that is kind of subpar. It's not really the best they could do. It's just kind of what was available to them, and so they settled for less than. We all know people who are in relationships, and you look at them and you're like, you could do so much better. What are you doing? If you need a visual, I can have Kelsey come up here. Every time I do that, it's like, you look at Kelsey and you're like, oh yeah, and you look at me and you're like, what are you doing? You could do so much better. And we all know people who have settled in some form or fashion in life for less than the absolute best. And what I found was there were about 5 different characteristics that people said were the top 5 reasons that people settled in life. And what I think it happens is it applies to us in our spiritual life as well. Because if we're not careful, we'll settle in our spiritual life and we'll refuse to see the best that God has for us. The first reason, and you have it there in your listening guide, the first reason that they settled where they were is because of their past. Don't you love when people use God to explain things or kind of as their cop-out? If you read here in verse 4, it says, the land the Lord subdued before the people of Israel and are suitable for livestock. God gave us this land. So we're just going to stay right here where we are. It manifests itself in different ways. People are like, oh, well, God gave me grandkids, so I can't go to church anymore. What? Did you just use your God giving you grandkids as a reason you can't go to church? Or hey, listen, God's just blessed me with an opportunity to work on Sundays, and so I can't go to church anymore. If God blessed you, then why in the world aren't you going to church where you should be returning to him the blessing that he gave to you? And that's what the nation of Israel has done here is they said, listen, God gave us this land. And I don't know if you know this or not, Moses, where we came from, it was pretty rough. Over in Egypt, they made us do some really hard work. And then after we left Egypt, we went into the desert and it was hot. It was sticky. There were times we didn't have any water. There were times we didn't have any food. A couple chapters before this, there were serpents, snakes, I'm out. And so there's all this different stuff in our past. And I don't know if you know that or not, but we've had a really hard past. And so where we are right now compared to where we've been is A-okay. But actually, they don't use the word A-okay. I love what the author does here when he writes this. In Scripture, the scribes, they said it was suitable. What does suitable mean to y'all? You can show me you don't even have to say a word. You can just show me with one motion. What does suitable mean? I mean, it's not the worst we've been in. It's not the best. It's not the worst. It's just, And it's so funny because what happens to us and what happened to the nation of Israel here, the 2.5 tribes, is they sat and they looked at where they'd been. And they said, man, where we've come from has been really, really tough. And this is all right. This is okay. This is nowhere near what we've been through. And so we're good just to stay here. It'll work, they said. See, what they were doing is they were living off of past victories that God had given them. God, you don't know what my life used to be like. And so if you knew what my life used to be like, where I'm at right now is pretty okay. And so there's no reason for me to pursue anything further because I'm not as bad as I used to be. I may not be as good as I want to be, but I'm pretty okay. And what happens is you start to settle based off of what your past looked like, and therefore your past dictates to you that because you're better than where you were, that's the best it ever gets. Class of 2021, you will hear 1,000 times, high school is the best years of your life. If you allow it to be, it is. College is the best years of your life. If you allow it to be, it is. But if you stop and you think, yeah, man, where I was pretty good, I would love to go back to like mom and dad paying gas, not having to do anything on Friday nights other than hang out with friends, like sleeping more than 5 hours. Those would be all cool things. But the reality is, if I look at that and I say that that was the best there ever was, then what happens is I start to diminish what could be out there in the future. And so we all settle because our past is good. If we are content with just not being where we have been, we will never strive for what could be. The Bible says it like this in Proverbs chapter 4, verse 25. Let your eyes look directly ahead and let your gaze be fixed straight in front of you. Over in Luke, Jesus is talking, and he's talking about Elijah and Elisha and Elijah. And he says, Jesus told him, anyone who puts his hand to the plow and looks back is not fit for service in the kingdom of God. It's this story where Elijah goes to Elisha and he says, hey, listen, I want to go with you. I want to serve with you, but I've got some stuff I've got to take care of back here. And Elisha says, what have I done to you that you feel like you have to leave things behind? It's what God's calling you to do, not me. And what you find is Elijah then takes and burns his plow as a symbol that he says, hey, listen, I'm not going back. I'm done with that. As long as I have this that I can go back to, I'm always going to be tempted to settle for less than God's best. Philippians, I think in your listening guides it's wrong, but it is Philippians 3:13. Paul says, no, dear brothers and sisters, I have not achieved it, but I focus on one thing, forgetting the past and looking forward to what lies ahead. Graduates, Broadway Baptist Church, don't settle because your past was good. Don't settle because your past was bad. Don't let your past dictate to you how great of a future God can have for you. The second reason you find that most people settle is because of pain. If you look in your listening guides back at verse 6 of Numbers chapter 32, Moses said to the Gideonites and the Reubenites, should your fellow Israelites go to war while you sit here? See, what was going to happen is they knew going into this land, they were going to have to take it over. There were going to have to be some battles. There were going to have to be some fights. There was going to have to be some different wars. They were going to have to cross a river. There was a lot of pain that could be in their future. And so what they decided to do is they said, hey, listen, we know the pain that could be. We're good here without the pain. As I read through this story over and over again as I was getting ready for this, it's interesting to me. God brings about a great victory, and you see that phrase time and time again in the Old Testament. The Lord brought about a great victory. But what it never tells you when that happens is, are there any casualties? See, I think for a lot of us, what we do is we look at the casualties and we say, nope, not worth it. See, the nation of Israel knew, the 2.5 tribes that were refusing to go into the land knew, hey, listen, if we go across the river, if we do this, there's going to be the possibility of some casualties. And we're just not really willing to risk it. Which leads me back to this question. Isn't what's on the other side of the Jordan God's best for them? I mean, this was the promised land. Like, this was the land flowing with milk and honey and everything that God has promised the nation of Israel, of everything that it could be and the potential that could be there was God's absolute best. And they say, God's best isn't really worth it. We're good here. We're just going to settle right here because there's a lot of casualties that could be associated with us if we go across the river. For many of us, we settle because our victory is not worth the potential casualty. Romans chapter 8, verse 18 says this, "For I consider that the sufferings of this present time are not worth comparing to the glory that will be revealed in us." In 1 Peter chapter 4, verse 13, Peter says this, "Be glad for the chance you have to suffer as Christ suffered. It will prepare you for even greater happiness when he makes his glorious return." The third reason that the people came up with for settling for less than their best was they became comfortable. In verse 1, you see it again. There's this word, suitable. And it's as if they were saying, listen, this land has everything we really need in it. Why look for anything else? We don't necessarily know what's over there. I mean, we know what God's promised us, but look, when I look around, I see everything I need. Why do I need to pursue something different? And what happens is we become comfortable with where we are if we're not careful. We settle because we're comfortable. It looks like this for us. Brother Kevin teaches Sunday school class. I kind of like my Sunday school class. I don't want to go teach another Sunday school class because then I have to leave my Sunday school class where I'm comfortable. Nursery? No, listen. I have kids at home. I don't need to go work in the nursery. There are other people who don't have kids at home. They can work in the nursery. I'm with kids not really. My wife's with kids 24 hours a day. Sometimes feels like 25. I'm with kids all the time. I don't need to be around kids. That's somebody else's job. We have a wonderful worship facility. It's air conditioned, padded seats. Everything's nice. You have screens that light up and you can see things on. And what happens to us as Christians is we start to become comfortable. But what I fear happens to us as we become comfortable is this. When we settle because we become comfortable, we stop echoing what the Christian life is actually supposed to look like. One of sacrifice and of service. Over in James says this, but don't just listen to God's word. You must do what it says, otherwise you're only fooling yourselves. It's the idea that, listen, God's word is supposed to make you uncomfortable. If you can read God's word and not become uncomfortable, it means that you're perfect. And ain't a soul in here perfect. I hate to break it to you. But see, what happens when we read God's word is it's supposed to make us a little bit uncomfortable because it's supposed to show us parts of our life that are supposed to reflect Christ more, areas we need to work on, things we need to become striving to be better at. Also, Jesus says this in Mark chapter 10, verses 21. You guys know the story of the rich young ruler. And Jesus, looking at him, loved him and said to him, "You lack one thing. Go sell all that you have and give it to the poor, and your treasure will be in heaven, and come and follow me." Now, you guys all know the story. Again, it wasn't so much that Jesus needed this guy's money, and that's why he was telling him to go sell everything, or because Jesus wanted to see, how much money he had or what his wealth was worth to him. The reason Jesus tells him this is because he wants to say, listen, your life is supposed to be uncomfortable. As a Christian, your life is supposed to be about sacrifice and service because that's what Christ lived for us as an example. Not to be outdone by that one, you've always got this passage. And he said to all, "If anyone would come after me, let him deny himself, take up his lazy boy, and follow me." kind of a loose translation, but I think you get it. He says, take up your cross. Your cross is what sets you apart. It's the thing that makes you uncomfortable. It's the thing that pushes you out of settling because you're comfortable and makes you uncomfortable to pursue the life that God has for you. Let me take this from a different direction. When you get asked, this may get too personal. You get asked to do something with casual friends. Is the first thing that comes to your mind all the reasons and all the excuses you can come up to get out of having to go and be with that person? Anybody? You don't have to raise your hands. Okay. We do, right? We always, that's what our tendency is we try to come up with ways, we try to come up with excuses not to engage with people. What about serving in church? Is every time somebody asks you to serve in church, the first thing you do, oh, well, I think I tore my hip flexor. I don't know what that is, but somebody who graduated with radiation something or another could probably tell me. But I think I tore that. I don't know, I can go pick up kids at VBS. Or, hey, listen, we're doing a Bible study today at 3:00. Oh man, 3:00. I don't have my phone on me right now, and I don't have my calendar. I know I'm supposed to do something today at 3:00. I can't tell you exactly what it is, but I know there's something I'm supposed to do. And so all of a sudden we start to come up with excuses of ways to keep us in our comfort zone instead of stepping out of our comfort zone into the life that God has for us. The fourth reason that they came up with as to why people tend to avoid or tend to settle too early is this. It's lack of faith and fear. The first time I read this passage, it didn't really strike me as all that odd. If you read it again, but we will arm ourselves for battle and go ahead of the Israelites until we've brought them into their place. Meanwhile, our women and children will live in fortified cities to protect them from the inhabitants of the land. It's like, makes sense, right? Every guy in the room, if you're out on a hot date with your wife and somebody comes up and threatens your wife, what do? Stand in there and fight that dude. It makes sense. You don't send your women and children to do battle. The men should go and do battle, and the women and children should be safe, right? It's just logical thinking. And so as I read that, I was like, I don't get what's going on here. But then I started thinking back through everything that the nation of Israel had gone through up until this point. Who fed the nation of Israel in the desert? Not the men. Who gave the nation of Israel water in the desert? That wasn't the men either. Who kept the nation of Israel safe as they traveled through the desert and wandered for 40 years? Oh, man, that wasn't necessarily the men either. See, God had done all that. God had protected them. God had been faithful. God had come through time and time again to provide for them, to protect them, to keep them safe. And now all of a sudden they get to the Jordan River and they're like, God, listen, you've done a great job of protecting us in the past, taking care of us in the past, but now we've got it. You don't need to protect us anymore. You don't need to keep us safe, God. We've got fortified cities. We're going to take care of our women and children like that. And see, what that really shows is a lack of faith the nation of Israel had in God. They've forgotten everything that he had done, and so their faith diminished based on their concerns around them. We don't know all that we're going to encounter when we cross that Jordan River. There's probably going to be some dangers and some pains, and so they need to stay here while we go and fight because they're safest here. Instead of realizing that God had been with them the whole time, and it was God who was protecting them, and God who was taking care of them, and not just the men. But then as I read this passage again, it still didn't click, and something stood out to me. When you read that again, meanwhile, our women and children will live in fortified cities for protection from the inhabitants of the land. They're not even worried about where they're going. See, the women and children are staying behind and living in fortified cities in the land on the other side of the Jordan. They're not even worried about what's over there. They're saying here they need protection from the inhabitants that's around them. They were afraid of their current circumstances, and that fear dictated what they did in their future circumstances. Interesting, too, when you read this, the only reason that there were fortified cities and people there who would be a threat to them is because the nation of Israel wasn't obedient when God told them to destroy every nation as they go through. They were to wipe out every nation as they went through. But they decided, well, not this one. This one's okay. They can stay. We kind of like some of the people over here, so we're going to let them live with us. It's okay. And because of their disobedience, now there were people who were living in the land that they were trying to keep that didn't like them. And so their fear kept them from making the decision that said, hey, listen, we're taking everyone with us because that's what God's called us to do. When you talk about this idea of fear, it's as if they were saying, yeah, that's great that there's land over there, but have you seen who we're surrounded by? There's a lot of people around here that don't like us, and if we continue, then we're just going to add more people who don't like us, and so we're better to just stay here with the fear we know. Never happens to us when we settle because of fear, does it? Because it's easier to handle the fears we know than the fears that are on the other side of the river. And so I'm more comfortable. I'm all right with these fears. I can handle them. I don't exactly know what's over there. And so this fear is going to determine the fact that I don't even want to bother with that fear over there. When our lack of faith in God and our fear of the unknown cause us to settle, we miss the opportunity God has for us, for our own faith to grow. Romans chapter 4, verses 18 through 22 say this: even when there was no reason for hope, Abraham kept on hoping, believing that he would become the father of many nations. For God had said to him, that's how many descendants you will have. And Abraham's faith did not weaken, even though he was about 100 years of age, and he figured his body was as good as dead, and so was Sarah's womb. Abraham never wavered in believing God's promise. In fact, his faith grew stronger, and in this, he brought glory to God. He was fully convinced that God was able to do whatever he promised. And because of Abraham's faith, God counted it to him as righteous. See, if Abraham would have just lived in lack of faith and fear, that little verse 20, the end where his faith grew stronger, wouldn't be there. Because a lot of times as God pushes us into that land on the other side, it's your faith, it's my faith, it's our faith that grows for God's glory. The last reason people gave for settling short of their best was simply this: they lost their passion. They lost their purpose. Y'all ever just get tired? I mean, just like sit on the floor, I'm done, tired. I forget what day it was this week. I came home one day and I made it to the doorway of the house, and I remember I just sat down. I haven't got the energy to walk like 5 more feet to the couch. I just want to sit here. I'm done. See, a lot of times what happens to us is because we lose our purpose and our passion, we decide it's best just to settle. I'm going to skip ahead real quick. Verse 19. We will not receive an inheritance with them on the other side of the Jordan, because our inheritance has come to us on the east side of the Jordan. Moses, I don't know if you know this or not. We've been walking for 40 years. My legs are tired. I'm done. I just want to sit down. I just want to rest. I don't want to have to worry about going across this river. And I'm just tired, Moses. We've been wandering for 40 years. Give me a break. I'm done. I'm tired. And because we're tired, because we've lost that passion, or because we've lost our purpose, we decide that it's better just to settle on the other side. I'm going to skip these. Anybody ever seen the movie Braveheart? I'm a huge Braveheart fan. I started to wear my kilt today, but Gene Wright would probably take a picture and post it someplace and never let me live it down. But I love the movie Braveheart. Love it. I have this clip up here from the movie Braveheart. And if you don't know anything about Braveheart, here's what happens. Spoiler alert, just a heads up. This guy named William Wallace is leading the Scottish Rebellion against the English. And when people describe William Wallace, they talk about how he fights with passion, and this passion that he fights with inspires other people to come and fight beside him because they believe in his cause. They can rally around what he's doing. He has this passion that just leaks out into other people, and they want to follow him because of what God is doing, or because what he is doing. Jumping ahead of myself. And so as the movie goes on, actually one of my first speeches I gave in college in public speaking class was his speech to his army before the first big battle. And I got up and I did it in a Scottish accent, and it was awesome. I'm not going to do it for you today because you guys will make fun of me. But like when you watch the movie, I mean, these guys are ready to tuck tail and run. Like they're out. They see this big army over there, and they're like, nope, we're not fighting. We're going home. And he gets up and he rides this horse up and down in front of him and gives this like just dramatic speech. And all of a sudden, the next thing you know, these guys are ready to go into battle because he just like inspired them with this passion that he fought with for this purpose of freeing Scotland from England. But the clip is from a little bit different point in the movie. See, they've had their battles. He's joined forces with Robert the Bruce, the unofficial king of Scotland, and they were supposed to be united behind this idea of free Scotland, free from England. And Robert the Bruce and William Wallace were going to go in, and they were going to fight the rest of the English army in England, and it was set up to be this epic battle. But what happens is the Scottish forces start to lose because Robert the Bruce didn't show up to battle like William Wallace thought he was going to. And so William Wallace, in a last-ditch effort, decides that if he can attack the king, if somehow he can kill the king, then maybe it will inspire his troops and they will battle back and they'll win this fight. And so I don't think this is necessarily historically accurate, but in the movie, he goes and he charges across this field on a horse to go kill the English king. And they look to this knight and they say, hey, protect the king. So the knight rides back and he ends up taking down William Wallace, and they have this moment that I don't know that could actually happen on a battlefield where both their helmets are off and they're sitting there and they're looking at each other. And this is the face that William Wallace makes when he realizes the knight who's protecting the king is his ally, Robert the Bruce. The guy who was supposed to fight with him is fighting with the enemy. And he realizes that the cause, the passion, everything that he'd been fighting for at that moment is gone. And so if you watch the movie, he takes a step back and he looks at his former ally and he looks around. He just sits. And he looks and he sees the enemy army closing in on him. And instead of getting up and running away, he just looks around again and lays down. Because he's lost his passion. The purpose, the common cause that he had to fight for was just taken away from him. And so this face to me captures that moment. When you're just exhausted. You've lost your passion. You've lost your purpose. All the things that you thought were worth fighting for have just been stripped away, and you're left in this, just settle here. I'm done. I don't want to go on anymore. Scripture says it like this. Sin will be rampant everywhere, and the love of many will grow cold. You guys all know this next passage. It's Revelation chapter 2. It's John is writing to the church at Ephesus what Jesus is telling them. And Jesus tells them, hey, listen, you've lost your first love. You've lost your passion. You've lost your purpose. And because you've lost it, you don't love God the way you should. See, when I think about all this that's going on, and just to be somewhat transparent with you guys, that's kind of where I've been in life, of just settling because I'm done, I'm tired. And so I'm just going to settle because it's not so much that it's the best, but it's just where I am, and so I'm here, and this is it. But I think what happens to us is this. We know there's land over there. We know it's good, but I'm really just tired. It's just not worth the fight. It's just not worth it anymore. And so we forget the purpose that we were going to the land in the first place. Why was Israel going to this land? Was it because it was a good land, because it was suitable for livestock, and because they could raise goats and donkeys and horses and chickens and cows and everything else? Or was there a much bigger picture being played out? See, because when the nation of Israel was called, when the land was established, when God made that promise to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, it wasn't just so that they could have good farmland and so they could live and be good farmers. The reason God called out the nation of Israel is because he said, listen, you're going to be my people. I'm going to be your God. You're going to be my people. You're going to live in this section, and you're going to reflect to every nation around you who I am. See, the nation of Israel, the purpose of that was always to reflect God to every other nation. But when they got tired, they lost their purpose. I don't really care about reflecting God on the other side of the river. I don't really care about going over there on the other side of the river and being the nation that God called us to be. I just kind of want to stay here. I just want to settle over here because I'm just tired. I'm done. See, when we lose or when we shift our focus to our plans, we lose God's purpose in the process. If you're wondering what happens to these people and how you know that like them settling down too soon was the wrong move, you don't actually find that out until 1 Chronicles way later on. See, they have a kingdom, they set up a kingdom, they have civil wars, they have good kings, they have bad kings, they have a long history where the nations do pretty good by themselves. But then you come to 1 Chronicles chapter 5, verse 26, and there's this verse there. It says, so the God of Israel stirred up the spirit of Pul, king of Assyria, and the spirit of Tilgath-Pileser, the king of Assyria, and he took them into exile, namely the Reubenites, the Gadites, and half the tribe of Manasseh. So you don't find out until all these years later that when they settled down too soon, what it actually did is it took them out of the protected promise God had for them. God's plan was that the nations would be together and that together they could ward off attacks and they could ward off enemies and they would be in a spot where they would serve him alone. But because 2.5 tribes decided that they were going to settle on this side, they were the first ones to get captured. They were the first ones to go into exile. Oh, don't get me wrong, they still had the name. They still had the Israelite name. They were part of the tribes of Israel. But they missed God's promise of the possession. So what about y'all? Graduates, let me beg with you, plead with you. Don't settle down. I know your parents are probably going to hate me for that. That's fine, but don't settle down. Don't settle until you are absolutely sure you have achieved God's best for your life. Don't settle in a job. Don't settle in a relationship. Don't settle in anything until you are sure you have achieved God's absolute best. Church, I've got to ask you. Because see, what I think happens is that the individual members of a church determine the direction of the church. And so what God is doing in your life individually is ultimately going to be what happens to our church as a whole. And so as an individual, if you're settling in your spiritual life, if you're like, how's your spiritual life? What's going to happen to our church is years down the road. How's your church? Because what you settle for as an individual member of this church determines what happens to our church in the future. Are you settling in your Christian life? Are you letting things like your past or the fears or the pain that could be out there or the comfort zone that you enjoy dictate where God's trying to lead you. Instead of going and finding out all the good things that God has sitting before you, are you content just to say, I'm good where I am, thanks? Let's pray. God, thank you for today, Lord. I thank you for these students and these who are graduating. And Father, my prayer for them remains so consistent. Lord, I pray that you would not let them settle. God, you would be a driving force in their life that would constantly pursue them to passionately live a life for you that pursues your absolute best at all times. But God, I don't just pray for the students in this room, because I understand that there are more people here than that. And so my prayer is for every person who's in this room, who's watching online. God, I pray that you would push us to a passionate pursuit of you. God, that we wouldn't settle just for okay. We would strive for your absolute best in every area of our life, including our spiritual lives. Lord, I pray as we sing a song of invitation and commitment, and Father, we just continue to worship you during this song now, that you would do what only you can do, and you would fill gaps where my words fell short. Father, for those in the room that are on the fence, and God, they're thinking about settling, and they're just to that point for whatever reason, I pray that today you would just stir in their hearts. Don't settle. Don't settle. You're not there yet. You've got to cross this river. You've got to go to the other side, because what's over there is my absolute best. Father, we love you. We thank you for all that you do for us and what you're doing through us. In your name we pray, amen.
Will you please stand, sing with us?
You're my constant in the chaos. You're my compass when the road is long. You're my portion, never failing. For me, only Jesus.
Let my heart want for nothing but you, just you. Let my heart want for nothing but you, just you. The riches of this world could never satisfy. Let my heart want for only you. You're my center, should I wander. You're my future, and you redeem my past every moment, and then forever. For me, only Jesus. For me, only Jesus. Let my heart want for nothing but you, just you. Let my heart want for nothing but you, just you. The riches of this world could never satisfy. Let my heart
just you. The riches of this world could never satisfy. Let my heart want for only you. Let my heart want for nothing but you, just you. Let my heart want for nothing but you, just you. The riches of this world could never satisfy. Let my heart want for only you. Oh Jesus, let my heart want for only you.
Thank you guys again so much for being a part of our graduation recognition. I hope that you would take a moment today and find somebody who is we honored and just tell them how proud of them you are. Tell them just how grateful you are that you have been allowed to be a part of their journey, and encourage them to keep going. I encourage you, keep going. A couple things. This has got all kinds of stuff in there. I know Merrymakers is starting back. We're getting ready to start up some new Connect groups in June, and so I don't know if that's in there. VBS, the announcements are in here. One announcement I do want to point out real quick is we're having a camp meeting for summer camp for our student ministry this afternoon at 5 o'clock. So if you are a student, or if you are a parent, or if you are interested in going to summer camp, or if you just want to come and be a student for that week, we would love to have you. And there's a meeting today at 5 o'clock in the youth ministry room. It's in the middle building upstairs. I would love to have you guys there and just share with you all the good stuff that God's doing and what we get to do at camp this year. So I think that's it. Is that it? Awesome. Thank you guys so much for being here today. I love you guys, and we will see you all later.